"Lily, do not touch that dog." Simone Carter's voice crossed the stone courtyard just as the plastic cup tipped in her 3-year-old daughter's tiny hand, sending a stream of warm water over the muddy front paws of Duke, the massive German shepherd everyone at the Whitmore estate had been told to leave alone. Simone stopped so suddenly that the basket of clean towels against her hip nearly slipped. Lily sat beside the courtyard fountain in a yellow t-shirt and denim overalls, completely unaware that she had just broken one of the clearest rules in the mansion. Duke belonged to Adrian Whitmore. At 8 years old, the German shepherd was disciplined, watchful, and famously uninterested in anyone except his owner. Staff members gave him space. Visitors were warned not to approach him. Yet there he was, stretched across the warm stone as Lily dipped her little cup into a shallow basin and carefully poured another stream of water over his dirty paw. "You got mud everywhere," she informed him. Duke blinked slowly. Simone's heart pounded. "Lily, sweetheart, come to mommy." Lily looked up. "But he is dirty. Now, please." Behind Simone, the courtyard doors opened. Thomas Grant, the estate's head butler, stepped outside and froze. His eyes moved from Lily to Duke, then toward the driveway beyond the arched entrance. A black sedan had just stopped beside the front steps. Adrian Whitmore was home nearly 2 hours early. Simone felt every ounce of air leave her lungs. Adrian emerged wearing a charcoal suit, his white shirt crisp despite the August heat. At 39, he carried the kind of quiet authority that made conversations lower when he entered a room. His gaze crossed the courtyard and landed immediately on his dog. Then on Lily. Then on Simone. Nobody spoke. Lily dipped the cup again. "His other foot is dirty too." Thomas closed his eyes for half a second. Simone set down the towels and hurried forward. "Mr. Whitmore, I am so sorry. I turned away for only a minute." She was supposed to stay near the staff quarters. Adrian said nothing. Simone reached Lily and bent to lift her. That was when Duke stood. Thomas took one cautious step forward. Simone stopped, moving. Duke did not growl. He did not bark. He simply stepped between Simone and Lily, then looked directly at Adrian. The courtyard became completely still. Adrian's expression changed. Not anger, disbelief. "Duke," he called. The German shepherd's ears lifted, but he remained beside Lily. Adrian called again, softer this time. Duke looked at him, then lowered himself back onto the stone beside the little girl. Lily smiled as though nothing unusual had happened. She took her small washcloth and carefully wiped a streak of mud from his shoulder. Adrian stared at the dog he had owned for nearly 8 years. Since his wife's death, Duke had stopped seeking affection from almost everyone. Even Adrian sometimes had to call twice before the old dog approached. But now Duke rested his head beside the sneaker of a 3-year-old child he had barely met. Simone finally lifted Lily gently into her arms. "We are going inside." Duke immediately rose again and followed them 3 steps. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Simone stopped. Lily looked over her mother's shoulder at the dog, then at Adrian. Her small face became unexpectedly serious. "He does not want me to go." Adrian glanced at Duke. "Why do you think that?" Lily considered the question with the solemn concentration only a child could give something simple. Then she wrapped one arm around Simone's neck and pointed toward the old German shepherd. "Because he misses somebody." Adrian froze. For the first time, Simone saw the powerful man's carefully controlled expression disappear completely. His eyes moved toward Duke, then toward the fountain where sunlight shimmered across the water. Years earlier, another woman had stood in that same courtyard washing mud from Duke's paws while humming beneath her breath. Adrian had spent a long time teaching himself not to remember that afternoon. Somehow, a little girl with a plastic cup had just brought it back. 2 weeks earlier, Simone Carter had stood outside the staff entrance of the Whitmore estate with Lily asleep against her shoulder and a knot of worry tightening in her chest. At 29, Simone had become skilled at solving problems before anyone else knew they existed. She managed grocery bills, preschool schedules, rent, bus routes, and long housekeeping shifts with the careful precision of someone who could not afford many mistakes. That morning, however, her usual babysitter had called before sunrise with a family emergency. Simone had contacted everyone she trusted. Her neighbor was working. Her cousin lived 40 miles away. The backup sitter could not come until evening. Missing work seemed like the obvious answer, except Simone had already lost hours the previous month when Lily caught a fever, and she needed every paycheck. So she had done something she hated doing. She had asked for help. Thomas Grant met her at the service entrance wearing his usual dark vest, an expression of permanent seriousness. His eyes dropped to the sleeping child. This cannot become routine, Simone. It will not. Mr. Whitmore values privacy. I understand. Thomas studied her for a moment, then sighed. She can stay in the staff quarters today. There is a small sitting room beside the laundry office. Relief nearly weakened Simone's knees. Thank you. Thomas raised one finger. There are conditions. She stays away from the main house. She does not disturb Mr. Whitmore. And she stays away from Duke. Simone glanced through the glass door toward the grounds. The German shepherd was visible nearly 60 feet away beneath an oak tree, resting with his head on his paws. She will not go near him. Thomas nodded. Good. Simone carried Lily inside. By 8:30, the mansion had settled into its usual rhythm. Marble floors reflected the morning light. Laundry machines hummed behind closed doors. Staff members moved quietly through rooms large enough to swallow entire apartments. Simone polished silver, changed linens, and checked on Lily every 15 minutes. The little girl colored pictures at a low table, ate apple slices from a plastic container, and seemed perfectly content. Around noon, Lily wandered to the staff room window. Duke was sitting outside, not beneath the oak tree, not near the garden, directly outside the window. Lily pressed both hands against the glass. Doggy. Simone looked up from folding towels. Duke stared back. That is Mr. Whitmore's dog, Simone said. And we are going to leave him alone. Lily nodded obediently. 5 minutes later, she returned to her crayons. But the following morning brought another childcare problem, and Thomas reluctantly allowed the same arrangement. By lunchtime, Duke was outside the window again. On the third day, Simone noticed him before Lily did. The old dog simply sat there, watching through the glass. Lily carried one of her animal crackers toward the door. No, ma'am, Simone said immediately. Lily stopped. For Duke. We do not feed somebody else's dog without permission. Lily considered this, then ate the cracker herself. Duke remained outside. Later that afternoon, Adrian crossed the rear hallway and noticed the strange arrangement through 2 sets of windows. The little black girl coloring inside the staff room, his German shepherd sitting quietly outside, and Simone working nearby. Adrian paused. Duke had ignored most people since Caroline died. Yet now the dog returned to the same window every day. Adrian could have asked why. Instead, he continued toward his study without saying a word. Simone never saw him watching. She only noticed that Duke kept coming back. And each time he did, Lily smiled as if an old friend had arrived. By the end of that week, Duke had turned his visits to the staff room window into a routine. He appeared shortly before noon, settled on the shaded stone outside, and waited until Lily noticed him. The little girl never opened the door. Simone had made the rule clear, and Lily understood rules better than most adults expected from a 3-year-old. Instead, she sat several feet from the glass with her crayons and talked to him, as though they were neighbors separated by a fence. I made a blue horse today, she announced one afternoon, holding up a page covered in enthusiastic scribbles. Duke tilted his head. Lily smiled. You like it? Simone watched from the laundry table while matching pillowcases. There was something almost funny about the old German shepherd listening so patiently, but she resisted the temptation to make more of it. Duke was a dog. Lily was a friendly child. That could be all it meant. Adrian Whitmore seemed less certain. Twice that week, he crossed the rear hallway and stopped where Lily could not see him. He watched Duke ignore the gardeners, the delivery drivers, and even Thomas calling him from across the courtyard, only to return to the same window. Adrian never entered the staff room. He simply observed for a few seconds before walking away. Simone noticed him the second time. Their eyes met through the open doorway. I am sorry if she is distracting him, Simone said. Adrian looked toward Duke. She has not touched him? No, sir. Fed him? No. Called him over? Simone shook her head. He comes by himself. Adrian studied the dog for another moment. Interesting. Then he left. That single word stayed with Simone because nothing about his expression suggested amusement. The following Monday brought heavy summer rain. By late afternoon, the storm had passed, leaving the estate gardens shining beneath fresh sunlight. Simone had been asked to stay an extra hour while the housekeeping team prepared guest rooms. Lily sat nearby with a picture book until Simone carried a stack of towels into the linen room. Stay right here, sweetheart. Okay, Mommy. Simone was gone less than 2 minutes. When she returned, the chair was empty. Her stomach dropped. Lily, no answer. Simone hurried into the service hallway. The rear door stood slightly open. Outside, tiny wet sneaker prints crossed the stone toward the courtyard. Simone followed them. Duke was lying beside the fountain, his paws and lower coat covered in mud from the garden. Lily stood beside him holding her small yellow washcloth. Lily Carter. The child turned. He is dirty. Simone approached carefully. You know you are not supposed to come out here. Lily looked down, ashamed. Sorry, Mommy. Duke lifted his head but remained relaxed. Simone stopped several feet away. Come here, please. Lily took one step toward her, then looked back at the dog. Can I clean his feet first? No. We need permission before we touch somebody else's dog. Lily considered that rule with a serious little frown. Then footsteps sounded behind them. Adrian had entered the courtyard. Simone straightened immediately. He looked at Lily, then at Duke, then at the washcloth in her hand. Before Simone could apologize, Lily raised her chin and asked him directly, Mister, can I wash your dog? For several seconds, Adrian Whitmore said nothing. Duke rested his head beside Lily's sneaker as though the answer had already been decided. Adrian looked down at Lily, then at the muddy German shepherd resting beside her sneaker. You want to wash Duke? He asked. Lily nodded seriously. His feet are very dirty. Simone stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, she does not need to do that. Lily, come with me. But Adrian raised one hand, not as a command, but as a request for another second. He had been watching Duke for days. The old dog had chosen that staff room window again and again, and now he lay beside a child he barely knew with a calm Adrian had not seen in years. Only his paws, Adrian said. Lily smiled. Okay. Simone hesitated. Are you sure? Adrian nodded. I will stay here. Lily filled her plastic cup with warm water from the courtyard basin, while Simone brought a clean towel. She poured the water carefully over Duke's muddy front paw, then wiped the fur with her yellow washcloth. You have to hold still, she told him. Duke lowered his head onto the stone. Adrian almost smiled. Lily moved to the second paw. Then, without thinking about it, she began humming. The melody was simple, only a few soft notes repeated beneath her breath. Adrian's expression changed. He knew that tune. Caroline used to hum it while making coffee, arranging flowers, or brushing Duke on Sunday mornings. It was an old children's melody, common enough that hearing it should have meant nothing. Yet Duke's ears relaxed immediately. His eyes closed. Adrian stared at the dog, then at Lily. Simone noticed. Is something wrong? Where did she learn that song? Adrian asked. Simone listened for a moment. From me. My grandmother used to sing it when I was little. I sing it to Lily at bedtime. Adrian looked toward the fountain. For one sharp second, the courtyard seemed to hold two different summers at once. Caroline laughing in the sunlight. Duke younger, impatiently shaking. Water across her dress. A life Adrian had spent years locking behind closed doors. Then Lily's voice pulled him back. Mr. Adrian? He looked down. Yes. Lily pointed at Duke. He likes the song. Adrian swallowed. He always did. Simone heard the weight in those 3 words and asked nothing more. Lily continued cleaning Duke's paws, humming softly while the old dog remained perfectly still. When she finished, she patted the towel against his fur with exaggerated care. All clean. Duke stood, stretched, and leaned his shoulder gently against her side. Lily giggled. Simone reached for her daughter. All right. We are done now. The moment Lily stepped away, Duke followed. She moved toward Simone. Duke followed again. Adrian called his name. Duke paused, looked at him, then returned to Lily's side. Simone felt the mood shift. Lily, sweetheart, come to Mommy. She lifted her daughter. Duke immediately stood closer. By then Thomas had entered the courtyard carrying fresh towels, and the black sedan at the front drive reminded Simone that Adrian had originally been expected later. The scene now looked exactly like something she had feared from the beginning. Her child where she did not belong, beside the one animal everyone had warned her about. I am sorry, Simone said. It will not happen again. Adrian barely seemed to hear her. Lily looked over Simone's shoulder at Duke. He does not want me to go. Adrian studied the old dog. Why do you think that? Lily tilted her head, considering him with the solemn certainty of a 3-year-old. Because he misses somebody. Adrian froze. The sunlight moved across the wet stone. Duke stood beside Lily without taking his eyes off her. And for the first time in years, Adrian allowed himself to wonder whether the dog had been grieving too. That evening, Adrian found Duke sitting outside the staff room window again. The mansion had grown quiet, and the last orange light of sunset stretched across the polished hallway floor. Inside the small room, Lily sat beside Simone while her mother finished folding a stack of clean linens. The little girl was humming the same melody from the courtyard. Duke listened through the glass. Adrian stood 20 feet away and felt an old memory return with uncomfortable clarity. Caroline had loved that song. She had never sung it particularly well, and she knew it, which only made her sing louder whenever Adrian complained. On Sunday mornings, she would sit on the back steps brushing Duke while humming those familiar notes. After Caroline died, Adrian removed almost everything that made the mansion feel like hers. Her books went into storage. Her favorite chair disappeared from the bedroom. The photographs remained, but mostly in rooms he rarely entered. Duke had changed too. The German Shepherd stopped waiting outside the kitchen in the mornings. He stopped carrying his favorite tennis ball through the halls. He ate, slept, followed commands, and kept his distance. Adrian had called it aging because aging was easier to understand than grief. Now Duke was sitting outside a window listening to a 3-year-old hum. The next morning, Adrian deliberately crossed the rear hallway at 11:45. Duke was already there. Lily noticed Adrian through the open staff room door. "Mr. Adrian," Duke came back. "I can see that." Simone stood immediately. "She has not gone outside." Adrian nodded. "I know." Lily pressed her palm against the glass. Duke lifted one paw against the other side. The gesture was accidental, imperfect, and somehow enough to make Adrian look away. Simone saw the change in his face, but respected the silence. "My grandmother said animals know when people are sad," she said eventually. Adrian glanced at her. "Do you believe that?" Simone folded another towel. "I believe they notice more than we give them credit for." Adrian looked at Duke. "Caroline was my wife." Simone stopped. He had never spoken her name around Simone before. Duke was hers first. She brought him home when he was a puppy. Lily looked between the adults. "Where is Miss Caroline?" Simone's expression tightened with concern, but Adrian answered gently. "She died a few years ago." Lily considered this with the simple seriousness of a child encountering a fact she could not fully understand. Then she looked at Duke. "That is who he misses." Adrian said nothing. Simone quietly touched Lily's shoulder. "We should not assume we know what Duke feels, sweetheart." "But he was sad." "Maybe," Simone said. "Or maybe he just likes your song." Adrian appreciated that answer. No magic. No impossible explanation. Just an old dog responding to something familiar. Later that afternoon, he found Duke beneath the oak tree and sat on the grass beside him for the first time in years. At first, the dog merely watched the garden. Adrian rested one hand against his coat. "You remember her, do you not?" Duke leaned quietly against his leg. Adrian closed his eyes. For years he had treated grief like a room that could remain locked if he never touched the handle. But Lily had opened something without even knowing there was a door. The next day, Simone arrived for work expecting everything to return to normal. Instead, she found Adrian in the courtyard brushing Duke while Lily watched from a safe distance. Lily placed both hands on her hips. "You are doing it wrong." Adrian looked at her. "Am I?" She nodded firmly. "He likes the song." For the first time Simone had ever seen, Adrian Whitmore laughed. Adrian's laugh had barely faded when a woman's voice came from the open courtyard doors. "What exactly is going on here?" Claire Whitmore stood beneath the archway in a cream-colored summer dress, one hand resting on her sunglasses as her gaze moved from Adrian to Duke, then settled on Lily. Adrian's expression immediately became guarded. "Good morning, Claire." His younger sister ignored the greeting. Simone recognized her from framed family photographs in the upstairs hallway, though they had never formally met. Claire visited the estate only occasionally, usually arriving for private lunches or family business. Lily, unaware of the sudden tension, remained beside Duke with the grooming brush in her hand. "Mommy, Duke has a fluffy part." Simone crossed the courtyard and gently took the brush. "Come with me, sweetheart." Claire watched them. "Whose child is that?" "Mine," Simone answered. Claire looked surprised. "You work here?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you brought your daughter to work?" Simone kept her voice calm. "My child care arrangement fell through. Mr. Grant gave me permission to keep her in the staff quarters while I completed my shifts." Claire turned toward Adrian. "You allowed this?" Adrian set Duke's brush on the stone bench. Thomas handled it. This is a private residence, Adrian, not a daycare. The warmth disappeared from the courtyard. Simone felt Lily's small fingers close around hers. Several staff members were visible through the windows, suddenly finding reasons not to look outside. Simone had experienced that kind of silence before. It was the silence people created when they knew something uncomfortable was happening, but were uncertain whether they had permission to acknowledge it. I apologize if my daughter caused any disruption, Simone said. She did not, Adrian replied. Claire gave a short breath of disbelief. She is wandering around the courtyard with your dog. With my permission. Claire's eyes returned to Simone. That is not the point. Employees have boundaries for a reason. Simone's shoulders stiffened. She could accept rules. She could accept criticism. What she would not accept was Lily learning that her presence made her something shameful. I understand boundaries, Miss Whitmore, Simone said. That is why I asked before bringing my daughter here. Claire raised an eyebrow. And yet here she is. Lily looked up at her mother, sensing the change without understanding it. Simone squeezed her hand. We can leave for the day if that is what Mr. Whitmore wants. Adrian studied Simone. She was not begging. She was not demanding special treatment. She was offering to lose hours she needed because she refused to stand in a courtyard and be treated as though she had deceived anyone. Claire folded her arms. I think that would be appropriate. Frankly, Adrian, you should reconsider whether this arrangement works at all. She does not belong here. Duke lifted his head. Simone's face remained composed, but Adrian saw the words land. He also saw Lily move closer to her mother's leg. Something inside him hardened, not with anger, but with recognition. For years, Adrian had built his world around rules, hierarchy, and control. He knew exactly how easily authority could become arrogance when nobody challenged it. Who told you she was asking for charity? He asked. Claire blinked. What? Adrian stepped closer, his voice quiet. Simone came to work. She asked permission. Thomas gave it. She followed the arrangement we approved. Claire glanced toward the staff windows. That still does not mean her child belongs in this house. Adrian held his sister's gaze. Do not confuse employment with ownership. The courtyard went silent. Claire's expression changed. Adrian continued before she could answer. Simone works for this household. She does not surrender her dignity when she walks through the service entrance. Simone looked at him, surprised. Adrian turned toward her. You are not leaving. And you are not losing a shift because your childcare failed. Then he looked at Lily, who was still holding Simone's hand. Neither of you has done anything wrong. Lily considered him for a moment, then pointed toward Duke. Can I finish brushing him? Adrian looked at Claire, then at Simone, and finally at the old dog waiting patiently beside the bench. A faint smile returned to his face. Ask your mother. For the first time that morning, the decision belonged exactly where it should have. Claire left the courtyard without another word, but the silence she left behind lasted several seconds longer. Simone watched the doors close, then looked down at Lily. Her daughter had already returned her attention to Duke, waiting patiently for an answer about the brush. You may finish, Simone said. Lily smiled and hurried back to the old dog. Adrian remained beside the stone bench. Simone. She turned toward him. Thank you for what you said, Mr. Whitmore. You should not have needed me to say it. The answer surprised her. Adrian looked through the courtyard windows at the staff members returning to their work. Claire was wrong, but the rules here made it easy for her to believe she was right. Simone studied him carefully. Rules are not always the problem. No. Sometimes it is who the rules protect. Adrian absorbed that without defending himself. Later that afternoon, he called Thomas into his study. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. They reviewed scheduling, emergency leave, childcare problems, and the quiet ways employees had been expected to solve family emergencies without allowing those emergencies to become visible. Adrian discovered that Simone was not the first employee who had struggled. A cook had once used an entire week of vacation when his son's school unexpectedly closed. A housekeeper had missed 2 shifts because her elderly mother needed transportation to medical appointments. Nobody had complained because nobody wanted to appear unreliable. Adrian had always considered his household efficient. Now he wondered how much of that efficiency had depended on people carrying private burdens in silence. The next morning, Thomas gathered the staff in the service dining room. Adrian stood beside him, an unusual sight in a space he rarely entered. Effective immediately, Adrian said, We are establishing emergency family accommodations for household employees. Temporary childcare disruptions, dependent care emergencies, and similar situations will be handled through Thomas without automatic loss of scheduled hours. A few employees exchanged surprised looks. Simone remained still. Adrian continued. This is not charity. It is a workplace policy. His eyes briefly met hers. That distinction mattered. After the meeting, Simone found him in the hallway. You did not have to change the entire household because of me. I did not. Adrian glanced toward the staff room, where Lily was coloring under approved supervision. I changed it because the old system was bad. Simone almost smiled. That sounds very practical. I am trying something new. Listening. Adrian gave her a dry look. Do not make it sound revolutionary. Around here, it might be. For a moment, neither spoke. Then a familiar humming drifted from the staff room. Duke appeared at the far end of the hallway and immediately walked toward the sound. Adrian watched him pass. This time, instead of calling the dog back, he followed. Lily looked up when they entered. Duke wants his song. Adrian sat in a nearby chair. Apparently, Duke has become very demanding. Lily began humming while coloring a purple house with a green roof. Duke settled beside her. Simone stood in the doorway, watching Adrian reach down and rest one hand against the dog's shoulder. There was still sadness in his face when the melody filled the room, but he no longer turned away from it. Caroline's memory had stopped being something he needed to lock behind a closed door. Lily had not erased the grief. She had simply made silence unnecessary. Adrian looked at Simone. I have another question for you. She raised an eyebrow. About Lily? About you. His tone remained professional. Thomas is reorganizing household operations. He says you are one of the most reliable people here. Simone waited. There is a supervisory position opening next month. Better salary, benefits, predictable hours. I want you considered for it. Simone's expression became cautious. Because of what happened with Claire? No. Adrian shook his head. Because Thomas recommended you before Claire ever arrived. Simone looked toward Lily, then back at him. Then I will interview for it like everyone else. Adrian nodded once. That is exactly what I expected you to say. Across the room, Lily stopped humming. Duke immediately lifted his head. See? Lily whispered. He was listening. Adrian smiled. This time, he did not hide it. A week later, the Whitmore estate felt subtly different. Nothing dramatic had changed in its limestone walls or polished floors, yet the people inside moved with less caution around their private lives. A framed notice in the staff office explained the new emergency family policy in plain language, and Thomas had already helped 2 employees adjust their schedules without embarrassment or lost hours. Simone noticed the difference most in conversations. People asked for what they needed instead of inventing excuses. Adrian never mentioned taking credit for any of it. He simply expected the new system to work. Simone respected that more than a grand gesture. She had also completed her interview for the supervisory position, sitting across from Thomas and the estate manager while they questioned her about scheduling, inventory, training, and conflict resolution. Adrian had not attended. When Simone asked why, Thomas gave the smallest smile. Mr. Whitmore said he did not want his opinion influencing the process. 3 days later, Thomas handed her the offer. She had earned it. The new role came with predictable hours, full benefits, and enough additional income that one unexpected childcare problem would no longer threaten an entire month of bills. Simone read the letter twice before folding it carefully into her purse. That afternoon, she found Adrian in the courtyard with Duke. The German shepherd stood in a shallow wash basin while Adrian attempted to rinse dried mud from his lower coat. A garden hose lay across the stone. Lily sat several feet away on a small chair under Simone's supervision, watching with enormous seriousness. Not his face, she instructed. Adrian looked over his shoulder. I know how to wash a dog. Lily frowned. You forgot the towel. Simone covered a smile with her hand. Adrian noticed. Apparently, I am being supervised. She takes management very seriously, Simone said. Lily nodded. Like mommy. Adrian glanced at the envelope in Simone's hand. You heard. I got the position. Congratulations. Thank you for staying out of the interview. Adrian turned off the water. Thomas told you? He did. Simone paused. That mattered to me. Adrian understood why. She did not want a favor disguised as advancement. She wanted her work to speak for itself. You earned it before I knew you needed anything, he said. Simone nodded. That matters too. Duke stepped out of the basin and immediately walked toward Lily, leaving wet paw prints across the stone. Lily began humming while rubbing his back with a towel. Adrian watched the dog's ears relax at the familiar melody. The sadness still came when he heard it, but it had changed shape. Caroline was no longer only the hospital rooms, condolences, and empty chair at dinner. He remembered her laughing when Duke tracked mud across the kitchen. He remembered her singing badly on purpose. He remembered ordinary happiness. "I put her photographs back," Adrian said quietly. Simone looked at him. "Caroline's." He nodded. "There are 3 in the living room now." Simone smiled. "How does that feel?" Adrian considered the question, less difficult than hiding them. Lily suddenly pointed at him. "Mr. Adrian, you missed a spot." Adrian looked down at Duke. "Where?" She jumped from her chair, stopped at a respectful distance, and pointed toward the dog's back. "There." Adrian rinsed the patch she indicated. Lily nodded approvingly. Simone laughed, and this time Adrian laughed with her. The sound carried through the open courtyard doors into a house that had spent years learning how to be quiet. Adrian looked around as though hearing the place differently for the first time. Lily had not fixed his grief. Simone had not rescued him from it. They had simply reminded him that remembering someone and continuing to live were not opposite choices. Duke leaned against Adrian's leg, still damp and content. Adrian rested a hand on the old dog's shoulder and looked toward Simone and Lily in the afternoon light. For once, nothing in him wanted to close the door. By the end of the month, Saturday mornings at the Whitmore estate had developed a routine nobody would have predicted. The courtyard doors stood open to the late summer air, sunlight warmed the pale stone, and Duke waited beside a shallow wash basin while Lily supervised everything from her favorite little chair. Simone no longer spent those mornings wondering whether her daughter was taking up space that did not belong to her. Her new position had changed her schedule, but more importantly, it had changed the way she carried herself through the mansion. She coordinated staff assignments, reviewed supply orders with Thomas, and handled problems with the same quiet competence she had shown long before anyone thought to reward it. Adrian noticed that too. He had also changed, though not in ways that could be measured by a job title. Caroline's photographs remained in the living room. Her favorite blue vase had returned to the hallway table. Duke's old tennis ball appeared beside Adrian's study door because Adrian had started taking him outside every evening again. The mansion still had rules. It still had security, schedules, expensive furniture, and rooms where serious conversations happened behind closed doors. But it no longer felt like a place designed to keep every human complication out. That morning, Adrian stood beside Duke with his sleeves rolled up and a towel over one shoulder. Lily watched him rinse the dog's coat. "Too much water," she announced. Adrian glanced at her. "Last week you said not enough." "That was last week." Simone laughed from the nearby bench. "You should know better than to argue with your supervisor." Adrian looked at Lily. "Apparently management has become very demanding around here." Lily nodded as if this were obvious. Duke stepped sideways, sending a small splash across Adrian's shoes. Simone tried not to laugh again and failed. Adrian looked down at the wet leather, then at Duke. Months earlier, something that small might have irritated him. Now he simply shook his head. "You planned that." Duke wagged his tail. Lily gasped with delight. "He is happy." Adrian rested his hand against the dog's neck. "Yes," he said softly. "I think he is." Simone heard the meaning beneath the words. She looked toward the open doors, where sunlight reached across the floor toward the living room. Caroline's photograph was visible on a table inside. Adrian followed Simone's gaze. There was sadness in his face, but no longer the kind that demanded silence. "I used to think moving forward meant leaving things behind," he said. Simone considered that. "Maybe it means learning what you can carry without letting it weigh you down." Adrian looked at her with quiet respect. "You always have an answer?" "No. I just charge extra for the good ones." He laughed. Lily immediately turned around. "What is funny?" "Your mother," Adrian said. Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Mommy is funny sometimes." Simone raised an eyebrow. "Sometimes." Lily had already returned to Duke. She inspected his damp coat with extraordinary concentration, then placed both hands on her hips. "Mr. Adrian." Adrian sighed theatrically. "What did I do now?" Lily pointed toward Duke's shoulder. "You missed a spot." Adrian looked at Simone. She gave him no help. "You heard the boss," she said. Adrian obediently reached for the washcloth and cleaned the exact place Lily indicated. Duke leaned against him. Lily started humming, and Simone watched the most powerful man she had ever met take instructions from a 3-year-old without the slightest concern for his pride. Adrian had spent years believing strength meant controlling who entered his world, what emotions remained visible, and which voices deserved his attention. Then a little girl had washed the paws of a lonely old dog, and her mother had reminded him that dignity did not depend on wealth, position, or permission. In a house once defined by silence, laughter now traveled through open doors. And Adrian finally understood that sometimes healing began when you stopped guarding every boundary and simply allowed kindness to come close.